Okay, Sylvia S. Johnson here. This is pretty good that it ran out my 15 minutes on the last one because this is my slide number 9. I thought slides 9 and 10 were more like the second part of the assignment where you more envision what it's going to look like and try to explain it to somebody. So I met with a student who'd had many different classes in various formats, and I wanted to talk with her about what I was trying to do. And the one thing we wanted to look at was rather than using class time to read PowerPoints to them, is there some way that we could design a course that would have out-of-class PowerPoints? And the reason I think this fits with this assignment is because as soon as you make it into out-of-class work, then if the student isn't properly oriented, it just doesn't get done. And so it has to be somehow incorporated in the organization so that the student is aware that they're responsible for it. They ought to be doing it. They need to be doing it. There's some kind of, like I said here, evidence. There's got to be some kind of evidence that they're doing these things that are out of class. And so, especially the out of class PowerPoints, I'm trying to think of some way that I could get them to do them and that they could communicate to me that they did them. Not necessarily that I would have to write questions over them, but somehow account for that. And I need to account for it both in space and in time. Then the other thing, though, I talked with the student about, because she had a lot of experience, was I talked about out-of-class quizzes and out-of-class tests. And so I'm just going to pick up where I left off when the tape ran out on the last one. But anyway, they usually have 100, in a 3-credit course, they'd have 150 minutes a week in class. So they'd have 300 minutes a week out of class. And we had talked about taking the assessment time for some of the assessments out of the 300 minutes rather than taking the assessment time out of the 150 minutes, which would then mean that instead of having 300 minutes of homework, they'd only have 200 minutes of homework a week. Now, I don't know if they have 200 minutes of homework a week at this point. I know some students do. I know some students have 600, and they're not working very efficiently, and they shouldn't have 600. And then there's ones who just have 100 minutes a week, and then there's some who don't do any work at all. But anyway, I don't think orientation is going to get to help them. Anyway, this is what I was looking at, what I wanted to try to maybe accomplish when I was presenting this to the student that was helping me. And I said, okay, well, if we have a 20 to 25 minute quiz, what should I go to my president of the university and say, here's the learning environment I need to make this happen? And as we talked, it really came out that the time constraint was almost as important as all the physical constraints. How long it would take for them to do it, and then how the dates would be scheduled. So we figured we'd use some kind of learning management system, like if you could have a due date, and then they would have up to 5 days after the due date to complete it. Or you could have a release date, and then they could have up to the due date to finish it. But, either way, they would have 5 to 7 days span where they could do the work. The student kind of liked the one where it was due on a certain day and then you had 5 days after, which is kind of a hindsight way of doing things. But anyway, so that's what we were thinking about, just the time on the calendar and the time on the clock. Then we said, well, what about security? If we did it in home, would they need a video camera, or would we just trust them? What could we put the online quiz in a file, and then the student would have to print the file, then they would work out the answers by hand, then they would have to scan or photograph with their phone. They'd have to take a picture of their of the file of their handwriting. Because I firmly believe that, especially in chemistry, when they're working problems, that the pencil is connected to the brain. And so I want to find out, I'm looking for some kind of a way. That's why I still have my quizzes in class. So I'm looking for a way that they would know to do these out-of-class quizzes, but that they would be handwritten. and that they would actually sit down and think them through, not that they would just read the question and click, 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 multiple choice, or select the most likely numerical answer. So anyway, I'm trying to think how to do that. And so one way to do it would be with paper. And then they would have to convert a file to a paper file to a piece of paper, and then write on the piece of paper, and then convert that piece of paper back to a file and upload it. That's possible. The other thing we thought, well, is we could have a drop-in room, or we could have a room in the library. The students would come on their own time, and we wouldn't need too many workstations there. We'd need, maybe 10 or 12, depending on how big the class is, but they would come in on their own time. If it was in the library, there could be a student worker whose job it is just to proctor that room. Or we have a help room here in our chemistry department. The tutor in the help room could also serve as a proctor. The student also said that sometimes we have just the department secretary is just the dispenser of the paper. Well, it turns out, I didn't know this, but our department chair teaches a class, and he has out-of-class quizzes, and he just leaves them with the secretary, and the students come in and they sit down at a little table there and they take them, and then she just hands them a stack of papers and it's all done. And I had no idea he was doing that. But anyway, I'm trying to look at some kind of a way to get more bang for my buck out of the class time, and still not give up the connection between the pencil and the brain. So that's what these thoughts are about. So then I thought, well, what would I look for? Well, ideally, this is the pie in the sky, is I would require every student to have a Surface Pro or an iPad. And then they would be able to load in the quiz. And so, if you wanted to know pie in the sky, what would this look like? We would have the technology that they could upload the piece of paper into their iPad or their Surface Pro. They could use a stylus and write out the answer, and then they could upload that. And then, even wonder of wonders, we would have handwriting recognition that is far enough advanced that it would recognize math symbols well enough to grade it. Ha ha! Wouldn't that be wonderful? So there you are. That's my pie in the sky, would be that I would have handwritten quizzes out of class that are computer mediated, and I could even have a place here where they put their thumbprint, so I know that it's them taking it, or some other. I mean, I go both ways with cheating. I mean, if they want to cheat, they're going to cheat, and it's just not fair to the people who don't cheat, because the person with the cheated degree can get a job just as well as the person without the cheated degree. And it's very hard for the employer to know which person is the one who faked his way through school and which one's the one who actually learned something. So that's, it's not that I don't trust them. It's just that I try to protect the students that actually do the work. So anyway, that's my concern, is we'd need a learning environment where they could do the handwriting but submit everything online. I could take advantage of the learning management system to serve the what's due, which brings the whole thing back around to organizing, because that's how they would know, if they have to present themselves to the department secretary to take a quiz, then they have to be prompted to do that. And so something in the organizing of the whole thing has to be set up in a way that they know, go and present yourself to the department secretary and ask for a quiz. And so I think that whole thing goes back to what I said in the very first, way back here. How far back? All the way here to the beginning, that they would have these things in the grade book. And if they had a blank or a dash in the grade book, then they would know that they would need to do that. And even in the grade book, it could say, where the dash is, it could fill the field with when the certain thing is due. That would be really nice. I guess a lot of people don't use the grade book the way I do, but to me, it looks like it's like a smorgasbord that keeps track of what you need to do. So anyway, that's my big conclusion on the build board and what I would need. My heart's desire would be to have some kind of way that I could have out-of-class activities that I would get the students to do, and they would not need me. Well, I guess I'd have to be in class. I'd have to be very enthusiastic about it and say, oh yes, you need to do that, you need to do that, you need to do that. Because a lot of times I think they just look at that and they hope that if they don't mention it, it's not really required. But we would need orientation that would convey the sense that it is expected, it is required, and is definitely part of the course. So the more equivalent these different things, the readings, the videos, the mastering homework, the quizzes and tests, the more all of these had equal validity in the presentation, the more the student would know that they're supposed to do all those things. And it would be nice if there was some kind of a walkthrough, is what kind of what I was imagining, where you'd have different places on the screen and the student would go here to there and they would move their way, and then there'd be a master tally of the smorgasbord and they would just accumulate check marks, which I must comment that in the eyelid course, you have that very nicely done, that there's different things you're supposed to read and listen to, and then when it's completed, it check marks for you. So I like that you gotta recognize the symbol there. I like that one very much. And I would like to incorporate that. The other thing, just pie in the sky here, is I was thinking that if we got this so that they were oriented well enough that we could have actually any pace through the course as long as a student showed progress. And that way, typically it's a 16-week semester, but maybe some students could whip it off in 8 weeks if they had everything laid out, what was supposed to be done. And they could find their own way if they were sufficiently oriented. Others might do it in 12 weeks. Others might take the typical 16 weeks. And then even sort of worst case scenario, somebody who's got really a lot of outside commitments, they might even take 32 weeks to do it. A student I was working with, though, she said, no, 32 weeks is too long, that they would lose focus and they would have too many breaks in between. So anyway, that's what I'm thinking about, how to have it oriented so that the student can find their own way, get everything done, do it in a timely manner, do it without cheating, use a pencil, and have control over the clock and the calendar. Have a good night.